Okay, welcome back to No Nonsense Catholic, talking about why Catholics are leaving the church, and Father Bill Peckman's response that it is primarily because of the lack of transcendence in our understanding of the faith. Without the transcendent, Father says, religion is just reduced to feeling good. So it's no wonder that even Catholic priests and religious would start dabbling in pagan religions and Eastern mysticism and socialism and environmentalism and so forth. Nor is it any wonder that they encouraged others to do the same, because the human heart needs a sense of transcendence. It's like G.K. Chesterton said: if you stop believing in the truth, that you don't believe in nothing. On the contrary, you're liable to believe in anything. You know, it's like if you starve somebody of food, they will gladly gobble poison. Same as if, you starve the soul of truth, it'll gladly gobble up error. If we take transcendence from God, then we'll have to appropriate it for ourselves. And, you make God irrelevant in the pursuit. You see, according to Father Peckman, this was the seedbed of the popular mantra, I'm spiritual but not religious. That for 3 generations, we've been making God irrelevant. And as a natural consequence, that seeps into your homes. And that's where it becomes fatal. He says the first generation raised on this watered down nonsense became parents who learned well the lessons taught. If eternal happiness is already guaranteed from God without our effort, then we can focus on pleasure and happiness in this world. And after a few generations, eternal happiness is overwhelmed by the temporal. And the primary way that religion was taught, he says, was by absence, with children, like their parents, becoming comfortable with pursuing the temporal exclusively. Mass, prayer, religious formation, he says, became theological roadkill on the highway to hell. that's, that's pretty dramatic. But, as he said, the heart does need transcendence. And what happens? The temporal, if you rob yourself of real transcendence, then the temporal starts to take on a transcendent quality. The pursuit of wealth and pleasure and power and honor become the focus. And the temporal, he says, gets treated with the devotion that was once given to the transcendent. And the transcendent gets treated with the laissez-faire attitude of the temporal. See, treating the temporal as if it were the transcendent actually has a name. It's called idolatry. Money and power and pleasure and popularity, these were the idols of the Egyptians and the Babylonians, the Greeks and the Romans. Christ came to free us from the slavery of this idolatry. And here are the Catholics and the Protestants and the Jews all lining up to worship at their feet. I think there's a consensus among spiritual writers that foreseeing the indifference to his sacrifice was what caused Christ to sweat blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay, so what's to do? Father Peckman says we need to remember that without a transcendent God, the church is irrelevant. The world believes this already, and for too long, we've acted as though they were right. We have to reclaim our birthright by remembering who God is and what he expects. And that's going to be a long road. Father Peckman, he says it's going to be a shock to the system, because it starts with us admitting that we messed up. We have to own our mistakes, do an appropriate mea culpa, reverse course. To repent literally means to turn back to God. And that begins by admitting that we're going in the wrong direction. It's pride that keeps the Spirit of Vatican II crowd from admitting this simple fact. It blinds them to the disaster that they've created with their progressivism. It's like C.S. Lewis said, we all want progress, but if you're going down the wrong road, the man who turns back first is really the most progressive. The most progressive thing that we can do today is return to traditional Catholicism. Father Peckman says we understand that in trying to tame God and the devil, or we must understand that in trying to tame God and the devil, we left ourselves open for ruin. Can there be any wonder that we've experienced the depravity both inside and outside the church in the last century? He says that the sexual scandals are just a symptom of the disease, not the disease itself, because those sexual scandals could only grow in the atmosphere of a loss of transcendence. He says, how can you molest children and seminarians and cover it up if you really believe in a transcendent God. So the solution, he says, it's not more protocols. What needs to happen is that our masses and our families and our parishes must reflect reality, that there most definitely is a transcendent God, that he does have expectations of us, and that while he does indeed love each of us uniquely, we have to love him as well. I've been saying for years that the church shouldn't seek so much to be relevant as to be coherent. We lost the road to relevance decades ago, and now we have to restore the transcendent. Catholics all over the world, all over the country, we stand up each and every Sunday and recite the Nicene Creed. Well, to be coherent, we must worship and live our lives in the way that we profess to believe. We need to repent. We need to turn back. It is the curse of men that they forget. We can and must remember who we really are and who we're really called to be. And that is no nonsense.